Very much. I'm Ashish Jaiman. I am, as introduced, I'm part of Customer Security and Trust Organization. And the Defending Democracy program's mission is to help entities whose mission is to advance democracy and democratic principles, help them with cybersecurity resiliency, as well as mitigate disruptions to the process of democracy. We have three pillars of focus areas: campaign security, election integrity, and disinformation defense. Today I'm here to talk about deepfakes. And I thought, hey, 13 days to the election, what's a better topic than talking about the impact of deepfakes on democracy? I've been actually focusing on this issue area for last 12 plus months because we believe that deepfakes will be a very effective tool to spread disinformation and disrupt democracies. So I want to start very brief with a very brief overview of information disorder. And as you can see, there are three categories of what we call, disinformation. You have misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And the whole idea there is disinformation and malinformation has a bad intent or malicious intent behind it. So a disinformation can very well be used as a misinformation by unassumed users. So, it's a very thin line where, I inadvertently share something bad about, whatever is happening around the politics here. But, there could be an intent behind that by a nefarious actor who has actually purposefully created that information disorder. So let's actually define what deepfakes is. So deepfakes is any media. You have pictures, you have audio, you have video, and now even text, which is manipulated by AI. The deep in the deepfake comes from deep learning, and the fake is manipulation of media. And again, the idea here is to create a hyper-realistic digital falsification to confuse voters, to harass someone, or to disrupt social discord, increase polarization and whatnot. Essentially, deepfakes, we believe, will become a very effective tool to spread disinformation. So I want to show you actually an example of deepfakes, which was actually created to raise awareness of deepfakes before the UK election. And I'm not sure if you can actually listen to the sound, but I put the link there as well in the bottom. It is a think tank in UK called Future Advocacy, and they created it. Just the idea there was to raise awareness, but the videos, the deepfake videos, were both candidates, Jeremy Corbyn as well as Boris Johnson, endorsing each other and asking people to vote for their opponent. And this was, again, the idea is that it was for issue awareness, but it can very well would have been used for nefariously creating, something that Boris Johnson may have said that may have, decreased his chance to get back into office as a prime minister. So let's actually quickly talk about the types of deepfakes that we know as of today. This field is very new. It is in improving. There's a lot of going on in this space. But right now, what we see is face swapping, which most of you may actually have seen on social media, is where one face of a person is actually grafted on another face. And the whole idea there is to make that person look like someone else. Some of the use cases we have seen of face swapping deepfakes is mostly on revenge pornography. The second thing is lip sync, where the AI is used to render mouth movements and facial expressions to make the target say things in their own voice, in their own tone and tonality, with the whole idea to confuse users on what that person may say or may talk about. The third is puppeteering, which is actually a very interesting field where the whole idea is you can manipulate the whole full body motions and actions based on someone else's actions. Image generation, 100% synthetic image generation, meaning you don't even need an existing person, you can actually generate the whole face or whole, object, entity, or even, human beings, images of them, obviously not the human beings, the images of them, which are purely synthetic. And we have seen that use in inauthentic profile pictures on social media. Voice cloning, which is again, taking someone's voice and clone it, and have them say things that they will never say. The last one is text generation. On the previous session, we are talking about GPT-3. So this is a technology which actually can generate synthetic text very, very easily. So before I jump into the bad things that deepfakes can be used for, I do want to spend like a couple of minutes to just talk about, hey, synthetic media is not bad, right? There are so many positive use cases, and I tried to actually synthesize them or put them together in those 6 categories, but there could be more. The best use case that I have seen, which is very close to my heart as well, is in accessibility. Accessibility, essentially, the whole idea is that deepfakes or synthetic media can accelerate the accessibility quest, essentially to improve quality of life for people who may have limitations or maybe may have some condition. One of the examples that we have seen is in speech impediment. So if there are people who are suffering from speech impediments, their own synthetic voice in their own tone, in their own voice, can be used for them to actually say things that they want to say and are running into impediment issues. Assistive navigation, which is another great example. If someone actually has vision impairment, synthetic voice can be generated to navigate, to help them navigate the surrounding world. Essentially, the surrounding world can be synthetically generated in form of a voice for them so that they can navigate that. Art and expression is another thing that I want to quickly focus on, is enabling teachers to deliver their lectures in a very creative way to engage students and improve the learning outcomes. We have seen videos actually in the classrooms for last many decades now, but bringing synthetic technology to bear act can tremendously help teachers to improve learning outcomes for their students. Reach and amplification, another creative use of synthetic media, especially in translation, where I can speak English, but if you are on the other side, maybe don't understand English, but you know Japanese, real time, you can hear my voice in different language, and that has huge potential. So not only in translation, but the reach that I can have across the board, and retail and other influencers can use it as well. And the last one I'll talk about quickly is innovation. And innovation, one of the things I want to talk about is privacy. So right now, everyone talks about privacy, especially around the healthcare data, because you have regulations, HIPAA and the like. Assume if synthetic imagery of a particular disease can be created, so that, and you can train the algorithm on that synthetic image to predict, rather than using real patients' data, you can actually create synthetic data of patient to train your algorithm, which lessens a lot of privacy concerns. So this is one example. There are many more, but I want to jump into what nefarious actors can do with this technology. And when we talk about harms and threat modeling of deepfakes, we typically would put them into 4 categories. That's how I'm thinking, is harms against individuals, harms against society, harms against business, and harms against democracy. Individuals, I think I did allude to that, is the very first use case of malicious synthetic media or deepfakes was seen in pornography. And the problem there is, that can inflict emotional, reputational, and in some cases even violence against individuals, and especially women, right? Because we know that especially what we see the data, the deepfake pornography is exclusively targeting women. In fact, yesterday there was a news broken by I think it's the Sensity, which they broke the news that Telegram, which is a WhatsApp-like messaging app, has a bot that can gather the pictures of from social media and create deep nudes of them. And there are hundreds and thousands of women which are actually whose deep nudes were created. So it is a menace, especially against individuals targeting women. What we are seeing right now. Society, the threat modeling or harms against society. You can think about deepfakes can accelerate the decline of trust that we have in media right now. You know, with the speed and scale, deepfakes can be used to spread misinformation. Uh, it can, amplify social divisions by fake media. Assume or think about, a deepfake of a community leader talking, saying things which are disparaging to another community. In some countries, we have actually seen violence against a particular community. Now, not deepfakes, but disinformation can incite it. Deepfakes can actually make it very, very real. Businesses, we have seen impersonation of leaders and individuals to facilitate financial fraud. There was a case study, or not a case study, a real case in Europe where a synthetic voice of a CEO was used to actually have an employee transfer around $250,000 into the nefarious actor's bank. So we are seeing it. In fact, what we are more worried about is deepfakes can actually move markets as well. Assume a CEO of a well-reputed company, their deepfake talking bad about the company or their product or whatever, right, may actually manipulate the market itself. Last but not least, and this is where I want to focus, is the impact of deepfakes on democracy. The whole idea there is that deepfakes can alter the democratic discourse. False information about a candidate 2 days before elections may ruin not only their reputation, but their campaign, disrupt their campaign. And even if it is a false information and they put all their energy to debunk that, the harm may already be done because there's not enough time before the elections where they can debunk and change minds of everyone. So that is one big issue that may happen. It's a hypothetical situation right now, but that may happen. The other thing which actually we are also worried about is a deep fake of can manipulate voting before and confuse voters, but also may cast a shadow of illegitimacy even after the elections if there are deepfakes of random acts of ballot stuffing or whatever, right? Now again, hypothetical situation, but is very much possible using by malicious actors using deepfakes. Lastly, and actually we'll go in detail on this, so I would actually not go too far on some of the scenarios. I want to actually point to this because this is, I feel, is very, very important to understand that this whole idea of trust and truth decay, where no one trusts anything, can be accelerated by this disinformation using deepfakes. It can become a very, very effective tool in the hands of autocratic governments as well, and can, and even in democracies, it can give rise to authoritarian kind of leaders. You can trust, you can use deepfakes to justify oppression. In fact, we actually, especially in the human rights context, there could be some potential scenarios. We are seeing something here and there across the globe, but this is something that we are really very worried about, as deepfakes actually have a potential to hurt democracies. So I'm going to give you one example, which is a real example in India. Prior to the elections in 2019, early 2019, a deepfake was used to amplify the reach of a politician. Again, it was a voice and lip syncing, but again, there was like there are ethical issues around it, and we will not go there. But this deepfakes was used in political scenarios in India almost a year back or more. Other thing that we have seen recently is deepfakes are used for public service announcement. In fact, I don't know if some of you came across this deepfake of Putin and Kim Jong-un talking about elections in the US. It was made for raising awareness of the issue and trying to bring people back to voting. But again, you should go and watch this. I put the link there. These are very, very real defects. Actually, you can, for naked eye, it's very hard even to figure out if it is real or not. Very interestingly, we are seeing some of the use cases of defects in a positive way right now. But again, the nefarious acts or malicious use of defects is not too far. Activism, we also have seen some examples. Stephanie Lepp actually created this Deep Reckoning website where, her idea is to provoke thought, right? What if these actors were saying things that they haven't said yet, right? So again, I don't want to go into details of the activism here, but I'll encourage you to go and watch these defects, and they are very, very real. Again, I want to harp on that message that the technology is here now, right? Yes, it's not as easy that I can create a very realistic in 4 hours. Yes, I can create a deepfake in 4 hours on my laptop. Not that fancy of a machine, but I have ability to go on the cloud, scale, and create something very, very quickly. But to reach that level of sophistication, I may require more work, right? I may have to do more work. But again, we are talking about sophisticated nefarious actors who has resources, have the tech capability, and may use it for doing material harm to individuals, businesses, society, as well as democracies. This is an example. I didn't want to go too far, but I want to bring it back here is, again, deepfakes can sabotage an image of a politician. It can confuse voters. It can also put a shadow of doubt on the results of the elections. This is something I want to focus a bit more. The term we call liar's dividend. And the whole idea is that just by the existence of deepfake, the word itself, we are seeing some of the people actually giving defects can give credibility to denials. Actually, we are seeing some people around the world who are actually trying to conceal their bad acts and calling it defects. Essentially, defects allow someone to dismiss a real bad act or speech as a fake and call it, this never happened. Defects can also be weaponized, right? Fake news we're seeing fake news being weaponized a lot, but defects can create that factual relativism, essentially give rise to what alternate facts, right? So, you can have a leader saying something really in a defect, doing something else, confuse people. We don't know what is real, what is not, right? And that is the whole idea of disinformation campaigns, but defects, again, can accelerate that. I don't know if I'm on time, or let me quickly check my time. All right, I have time. So now what can we do, right? So the basic idea is for any countermeasure to disinformation, to deepfakes, we have to think about two things. Effective response means two things. One is, can we reduce exposure to consumers about these bad things? And can we reduce belief, right? So this is all, how do we defend the truth, right? How do we defend the truth managing our freedom of expression, right? So we have to have a very good balance there. So reducing exposure, so there are countermeasures. So hey, let's just remove the content, and we'll talk in detail on what kind of countermeasures we are thinking about or what we have seen. But reducing exposure can be done by removal of content, differential promotion, dissemination control. So, WhatsApp instituted that you cannot forward more than 5 at once. So that's kind of, you're controlling the dissemination of information. And then demonetizing. Most of these bad acts actually have a financial motive. So if you come up with right kind of business models and de-incentivize people who are creating bad information, you may be able to control the exposure. On the reducing belief, there are a lot of research going on, is like, hey, can we label a piece of content? You may also see it on Facebook and Twitter and other places, where now these platforms are putting some labels. Now there is a lot of research showing that, hey, does the label work? Does it not? Or does it actually amplify or get this whole confirmation bias echo chamber going on? But anyway, so that's one of the technology. You can also provide additional context. We have seen some of the platforms actually are doing this, right? Where they see an information, they try to actually put additional context to that information, as well as point people to the actual factual information. And the last but not least is civic education, and we'll go more in the next slides about this. So countermeasures. So we talked about, hey, this is a bad thing which is coming as a fast train. There are a bunch of hypotheticals, but we are seeing something real there as well. So what can we do? So when we think about countermeasures, we are thinking in terms of 4 categories, right? So media literacy, which I believe and we believe that is the most effective tool to combat disinformation, deepfakes. Media literacy for consumers, media literacy for journalists and voters. The next category we think is platform policies. Platform policies absolutely can help if you have the right terms of use. How the platforms would treat misinformation, disinformation, and deepfakes on their platforms would certainly help in that effective countermeasure that we were talking a minute ago. Regulations, you have to have meaningful regulations. You just cannot ban disinformation or information or deepfakes, because again, the whole idea is that authoritative governments may use that regulation to discount dissent in their countries or suppress dissent. So you have to have meaningful regulations, but before even having meaningful regulations, you have to understand the problem. And it is a societal problem. It is not a technology problem at the end of the day, right? So you just can't regulate technology to solve a societal problem. So again, that's why I want to call out meaningful regulations rather than any regulation here. And the last but not least is technology countermeasures. Technology countermeasures, when you think about it, fall in 3 categories: detection, authentication, and provenance. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Before I think I'm okay. So I have time. I also want to focus on ethics of deepfakes. It's very easy to start talking about the negative use cases, positive use cases, countermeasures, and whatnot, without understanding the ethical implications. Because at the end of the day, the technology is allowing you to impersonate someone. Technology is allowing some bad actor to impersonate someone, or creating synthetic image of them, synthetic voice of them. So we also have to understand the ethics of deepfakes, both ethics around creation, but also, which we typically don't talk, is ethics around countermeasures, right? Putting a label may actually start getting into this realm of challenging my free expression. So we just have to think about that. But specifically, ethics in combating deepfakes for democratic organizations. So in politics, stretching the truth over representing alternative facts are a norm. But using deepfakes, the creators must think about ethical representation of it, because hey, alternative facts to influence an unassuming voter may not be ethical, right? And it is not ethical, in fact, at the end of the day. The other thing is the liar's dividend, which we talked about, which is when a true piece of media or undesirable truth can be dismissed as a fake news. Again, there has to be some ethical considerations. I feel that that is unethical, but we have to think about ethics around deepfake, synthetic media, uh, to have a holistic approach towards countermeasures and the use cases. With that said, uh, this is the end of my presentation. I think I rushed it because I thought the content will not be done in 30 minutes, but I'm glad that I could do it in 25 so that we have 5 minutes for questions if it is possible.
Thank you, Ashish Jaiman. Very good presentation. Perfect timing that you finished it in, and timely topic, and very well explained. Good job. And all of us are going through some of these things routinely to see what's all happening in the digital media, and it's given free, like, name the company with the F, starting with the F letter, and other companies, and they give you free, but you also get the damage out of whatever it is. You cannot detect. Common man cannot detect any of this.
Yes.
Here is a question from the attendees. One of them is that how can you trace traceability, right? Is a thing that you can mention. What are the traceability issues, etc. And we'll go from there to how do courts uphold definitions of these attacks.
Yes, so traceability actually goes back to detection. Detection of synthetic media is super hard. In fact, we learned from Facebook's deepfake detection challenge, where the best of the algorithms were only able to give 65% of precision on a deepfake, right? Unseen deepfake. So detection is hard. So before even we go into traceability, first we have to identify uh, uh, what needs to be done from a technical countermeasure, right? So detection is a cat and mouse game because deepfakes are generated, most of them are generated using AI, neural networks, and the way it generates is GAN, which is generative adversarial networks, where one AI creator is pitched against the detector, and with the simple idea that I have to beat the detector. So if you come up with a good detector, let's say tomorrow, and the creator may learn from that and make it fail. So traceability, you're absolutely right, it's a big challenge, but even bigger challenge is let me first detect it. Detection is hard. It's a cat and mouse game, which all of us have to work together. In fact, one of the things that I should have said is this is a very complex problem. It requires a multi-stakeholder and multimodal countermeasure or countermeasure technique. Multi-stakeholder meaning regulators, we talked about that, platforms, technology, media literacy, everyone has to work together to bring about a solution. But your point is very well taken. Traceability is super, super hard. But first you have to detect. The other question I want to quickly come to is the likeness, which I saw. So, which is again a big problem. There are existing rules and regulations around how your likeness actually can be tracked, or there are regulations on what you can do with that or not. The problem is, especially in some of the states, and it's not consistent across countries, across the states. The problem is after death likeness, right? Which is what happens when a synthetic voice or a synthetic image or a video of created someone who has passed away. And there are ethical issues as well, but it's a complex problem. It's not consistent across the globe, and in especially around when we talk about regulations around likeness.
There's another question on copyright policy. And,
Which is, yeah.
Go ahead.
Which again going back to the likeness. Yes, the copyright policy, again, it's not consistent across the globe, and especially around public figures. You also get the freedom of expression narrative, which can be counterproductive to the discussion.